to go on certain things. Now, why are you here? I told Matt, I hope you don't get mad, but I'm going to ask how many people are here because Matt said you had to be here. You were told to be here and you're like, okay, I trust Matt. Hey, pressure. Don't screw it up. Right, Jake? Okay, I appreciate that, Mary. Who else? Why are you here? Like, those on Zoom? Yeah. Yeah, I need to just repeat them. So that wasn't a question, that was a statement. But Mike in the crowd said he understands what it is, but he wants to get like how to use it, plug into it and actually set it up. Brand new, because you're brand new. Well, welcome. So, you know, there's an initiation, right? It's like some people are like, great, go for it. What do I need to do? Cartwheels? I'm good. And other people are like, no, I didn't know that, and I'm not going to do it. So I appreciate that. This is going to be a little bit of a fire hydrant coming at you. So. Vision setting and goals, that's why you're here. Okay, so some of you know how transparent and authentic I really like to be. Others may not. Please know that I'm coming from a place of care today because I'm going to push you a little bit on the garbage that you tell yourself. You guys good with that? And it's not a judgment because I do it still. So there is a reality around the tricks that our mind plays on us when we set goals and how we let ourselves get off the hook and the validations that we get, the excuses, like all of that stuff is, there's nothing wrong with it, but I do think it's really important that we acknowledge it, because if we don't acknowledge it, then we're not even addressing the real challenge that we're going to face every time we set a goal. How many of you set the same goal 10 times over and haven't hit it yet? I'll be the first. Okay. That's a good place to start that you admitted it. Because now you have an option of either picking that goal again or changing it. Either pick and commit or change it, because there's no judgment around it. Just change it then. Nobody else is going to know. So we're going to talk a little bit about just kind of the games that we play and why we set goals and the benefits of not setting goals, all of that fun stuff. Okay. Anybody else? Chris. Love that. Learning-based people. That's who I want to be in business with. So that's awesome, Jeff.
I'm learning to be a more effective goal setter. I'm not good at it, but I think ultimately I would like to lead other people on this. So I can know myself. I certainly can.
I love that. We can all set goals, but to be effective at it is really, really important. So we're going to break down actually something that you can kind of match every goal up to make sure it's actually a good goal that can drive your thought process. AJ, did you have anything?
Yeah, we could. I just went.
I just went from being to having improved, and I've known 411 for a long time, and I wanted to. I used it, but now I'm more of a good example for everybody on my team. So I just want to make sure that I am effectively doing it.
Vijay, I love that. There's a certain level of integrity that shows up with somebody telling you should do something and yet they don't do it. Is that weird? Yeah, that drives me nuts. You keep telling me I need to do that, but you're not doing any of it. So I'm going to go find somebody else to follow. I know it sounds judgy. It's not judgy. It's an alignment conversation, right? So, all right, I appreciate that. So here, I thought through, okay, I've taught the 411 class, I've taught goal setting, but I've never pulled these together. So the question I ask myself is, what do I want to make sure that I deliver or hope that you guys can walk away with that would be valuable to you? So there's a handful of things that I just want to walk through. I want you to understand why you're even setting the goals yourself. And beyond that, are the goals you're setting actually meaningful to you? We're in an industry, guys, that let's be honest, we look at other people and then we define some of our goals based on looking at other people and what they're doing. I don't think that's healthy for just our mindsets. If somebody's doing 50 million, should that be your goal? I don't know. Maybe not. But if you have a goal of 3 million, cool, have that be your goal. So I'll ask some questions around what's really the purpose of the goal that you're setting. And is it based on you or is it based on external pressures or things that you think you should be doing? Okay. The second one is how to ask yourself the tough questions and also create an environment where you have other people around you that you give permission for them to push back on the reasons you're saying you're not hitting your goals. Or if you're not setting big enough goals because you're afraid of maybe falling short. Okay. How to plan to have the discipline. I'm going to use this term a couple of times. Your schedule, your time blocking should not be a prison. I have plenty of people why do people get into real estate? Flexibility and what else? And money. What comes first typically? What happens when you have so much flexibility? You don't make any money. So it's balancing these things. You have to negotiate with yourself. We can't just tyrannize ourselves with our schedule. If you schedule your whole day out, how fun is that? That sucks. Like, language isn't too bad. So let's think about trying to be back to back to back. We're not going to be that disciplined. People in the corporate world aren't that disciplined. So why not just negotiate with yourselves to say, I'm going to do this stuff. And then after that, I'm going to reward myself. And then I'm going to do this. Rather than just hammering on yourself all day long and then you get home and you haven't really enjoyed any of the process. Okay. Understanding best practices around how to use this tool in and of itself, if you're intending on using it, if you don't commit to 90 days of just really, really being purposeful and keeping it in front of you, just don't start. Because it's a habit and it's super difficult to really get into the pattern. I've been using it for now 9 years. So the one you see may look different than the ones you've seen through KW, through the portal. This is what I found to actually work best because it doesn't get convoluted and it's all on one page. I don't have to look at more than one of them. I can keep it with me. But I'll share just some best practices on how to use it effectively in tracking. And then the last one is just to inspire yourself to something that's actually meaningful to you. I don't judge any particular goal at all. I look at how do we set goals that actually prompt you to become a better person. Why do we set goals? Why do we do it? Why do you do it? If you do. Have a target to hit, something to focus on. Okay, what else? Direction. Yep, love that. What else? So to accomplish something. What else? I like that one. Measure your progress. That's probably one towards the top. I'd put it towards the top. Roadmap, direction, progress, accomplishment. I'd ask yourself another question while you're setting goals. Who is it you're trying to become? Think about the goals you set. I understand there's an outcome we're striving towards, right? Who do you have to become in that process to hit that goal? Because if you stay the same, what's going to happen? Nothing different's going to show up, right? So I like the law that says the extent. I firmly believe that one. I think your development drives professional results. So if your communication skills stay the same, you'll be lucky if your results change. But if you improve your communication, you connect with people on a different level, you'll likely have more influence on telling people, this is why I'm valuable and this is how I can help you. And you put those things together and they're like, you know what, Mary, I like you. We should work together. Sounds great. There we go. You got to close it. You got to put it into an appointment. I like it. So I wrote accomplish, grow, achieve, obtain something, and strive to be the best version of yourself. So this is a question that I've asked in Leadership Academy more than once yet. How are you different today than you were 12 months ago? Or are you? Now, again, no judgment. I bet you we're all different in some way because the past 12 months has been a show, right? It's been different. It's forced us. Now, are you happy with the change? Or is it a byproduct of just the outside circumstances putting pressure on you? This is where I think, your personal growth plan really comes into play, because you're going to change in some way just based on how the world is showing up. Now, is it intentional, the direction that you're growing? I see. No, I don't have any scientific proof of this, so I'll just put a caveat on that. If everything that's showing up is unintentional, I tend to believe that it's going to head more negative than it is positive. Now that could be a negative statement now that I say that out loud. See, sometimes it's weird when you articulate, you're like, that didn't come out as positive as I thought it would, but it should have, and it didn't. So, but I naturally believe that it's the easiest thing to grab onto is negativity, for what's not going right, than to find the positives in all the other stuff that's happening. Despite all the other stuff that's happening, there's a lot of really, really good things that are happening, right? So do you have a professional and personal growth plan? If you don't, we're going to talk a little bit about where that fits on the tool itself. So I'd maybe write this down. Understand yourself well enough not to just listen to your thoughts and feelings, yet to be driven by your values and your commitments. Understand yourself well enough not to just listen to your thoughts and feelings, yet to be driven by your values and your commitment. Your feelings are real, right? Yeah, they're real. Are they right? Not all the time. There's certainly some value in understanding the feelings, but they're not always right. So when you understand, when you set goals, what your values are and what you're truly committed to, that changes a lot of things. Karen. Okay, thank you for that, because I promise you're not the only one. So understand yourself well enough to not just listen to your thoughts and feelings, yet be driven by your values and your commitments. You're welcome. The most valuable thing that this tool has provided me is it's allowed me to have really honest conversations with myself without BSing myself. Who's the best BSer in the world? You are to yourself. Man, you're good. You are really good. And you have all the reasons not to do things when things are tough and difficult and all of that stuff. It's a scary thing to go visit that, to call yourself out. That's why I do think environment matters quite a bit. Now, when somebody calls you out, do your best not to take it as a judgment. There's value in that. There's value in taking other people's perspectives in, even if you don't like it, even if you want to push it away. And feelings are fleeting. Like if you think about it, there's no one feeling that stays consistent over a period of time. It always shifts. It always shifts to the next one. So if you're committed, you can do things regardless of how you feel. Did anybody watch the Kobe Bryant thing last night? It was on at 9 o'clock on NBC. Who watches network television anymore? But it was really interesting to see how he made decisions around just the commitments that he made versus how he felt about getting up at 4 a.m. and being at the gym when nobody else was there. So it's really interesting. So let's flip this around a little bit. Why do people choose not to set goals? I've held a lot of coaching conversations and people say, I don't really set goals, and you might be in this room. So bear with me, hang with me. Why do people choose not to set goals? Failure, fear of failure. Somebody else said something. It's easy. Not sure what they even want. That's a good one. I think that's a real one too. Yeah. I'm gonna suggest you write this one down too. I like this one. This has been rattling my head for weeks. It says people don't want to set goals because it establishes a condition for failure. So people don't set goals because it establishes a condition for failure. It makes something definitive on whether or not you did or didn't do something. And that's a scary, we talked about the fear of failure. That's a scary thing. So I can easily just not set any goals and not have to confront that. One more time. People don't want to set goals because it establishes conditions for failure. So I remember I signed up for, I did my first triathlon, and I told, I don't know if there's anybody in here that was in that group. At that time, it was an accountability group. And I kid you not, the morning of, I stayed at a friend's place, and the morning of, I seriously had this consideration. I don't want to go. I might drown. I don't know. I didn't feel prepared. It was super scary. You got all these I had a mountain bike and everybody else had these road bikes. So you naturally feel inadequate when you don't have the right equipment. But I was like, there's no way I'm going back to that group and saying I didn't go. There's no way. I'd rather drown. I'm not gonna face that lie because I have to tell the truth and I don't want to tell that truth. So I'm gonna go do it. But that's the value in understanding and having people on your journey with you too. There is a condition for failure. And is failure a bad thing? I don't think it has to be at all. If you look at life, is that really what it is? Like, it's failure all the time. It's just lessons learned as you go. And if you're never failing, are you trying anything new? So I look at it as lessons along the way. The people that fail more know more, as long as they process it the right way. If you don't process it in a healthy manner, it can be detrimental. But there's just, the scary part is there's a lot of benefits to not setting goals because it gives you plenty of flexibility to do whatever you want. The challenge with that is you're not going to do anything significant. Is there anything in your world that has shown up in a big way that was just accidental over and over? That was meaningful? Nothing comes to my mind based on no response. I'm going to guess the same thing for you guys, right? So, so the same question that I asked, how are you different today than you are 12 months ago? Okay. Oh yeah, that's fine. Visual, this one's audio. We're gonna go up here. I'm gonna go here, and I right, then it's gonna be here, and we're gonna shut that. Two people, I'm sorry you didn't get that one. Same question as I asked before is, how are you different from where you were 12 months ago? Who do you want to be in the next 6 months? And can you identify anything that would establish some characteristics of who that person is in 6 months that would allow you to reverse engineer it back into this week, this month? Okay. I heard this quote: work so hard on plan A that you don't have to have a plan B. Like that, it's interesting when you don't have a plan B that the level of commitment changes. So think about it in that context. When you set a goal, what's the real commitment? Mark Willis, who used to be the CEO of KW International, I had a call with him for our regional awards back in March or April. And he said that his goal and his outlook is to live a life of inspiration versus obligation. What happens when you're not intentional about the responsibilities you have in your world? What happens as a byproduct of that? That's the right question. So if you don't do the things that you know you need to do, what's the byproduct of that? Failure? You don't get the results? Eventually, you're going to have to do them anyway. Shame, guilt, which would speak to a lot of the values that you hold. You actually steal all the freedom that you could possibly have away from yourself. Because at a certain point, you don't have any options but to go do a particular thing. I go back to 2007, 2008, 2009, when the market was just, there was literally this. Who was in the market then? You guys are still here. Good job. I saw plenty of people that were not willing to do any of the work, and they lost homes. They put in everything on a credit card. Now, there's not judgment in that, but I want you to understand there's a responsibility that you have to take, and if you don't, it puts you into this seat of not really having many options. I think just following through on things actually is going to give you more options in the future. So that's where I think that's where he was going off. The obligation part is not fun, because if you're obligated to do something, it might be because you don't have any other options. Right? So think about what would allow you to live more inspirationally versus I have to do this, I have to do this, I have to do this. That's not going to work over a long period of time. We all have to do it from time to time, but it's not a long-lasting opportunity for growth. We'll put it that way. If you want to live a special life, you have to do special things. Now, that doesn't mean you have to do huge things. One of the things that I find to be really, really interesting is consistency is really, really special in our world, because not that many people do it. What are the things that you could do today that if you did it consistently would change everything for you? Health, right? Health is a big one. What else? Read, development. What else? Invest over time. That builds, right? You guys are missing one that I thought was going to be first. Everybody is like, stay away from that word. I don't want to talk about lead generation. You lead generate for 5 contacts a day versus trying to do 50 on any given day. Which one are you going to get ahead with? It's going to be the 5 a day, because those are going to be more meaningful, not just out of obligation. There's going to be more meaning behind those conversations. Okay. So I took this from a book called Principles with Ray Dalio. If you haven't read it, it's a really long book. But what happens is we'll set a big. Oh, here we go. Don't trust Jake on this one. So Katie, if you can pin this one, I don't know if we're gonna. I use the darker markers on purpose, but so there's these. I like visuals, but what happens is we're all happy and excited when we're setting goals here, right? Then what happens? Either our expectations don't line up with what we thought was going to show up, or we stop doing it and we start to make mistakes, or we don't do it at all. We have a point here to make a decision. What's that decision, do you think?
Stop doing it or re-engage?
Stop doing it or recommit, re-engage. If the answer is to re-engage, this is where all the growth happens. This is your lessons. This is the wisdom that shows up from these mistakes that just got all messy in here. So what happens now is we can actually gain wisdom from all of this here, and we can set better goals to go up here. And this is your whole life. Everybody excited? Gosh, I can't wait to fail again. This is phenomenal. Just gonna get crushed tomorrow, and it's gonna be awesome. You get where I'm going though, where you can. It sounds negative, but I expect to make a lot of mistakes. I just don't expect to make the same ones more than once. So this part, while it can be well, it's necessary, not fun, there's so much value here. And I think by deflecting here, you actually just go right back here. By going through this, you get to go back here. But until you go through this, you're never getting past this. Anybody disagree? And it's okay if you do. It's not a challenge. Okay. All right, Katie, you can go back to the regular screen. Thank you. Thoughts on that? You guys are really serious right now. Everything okay? See, now I'm looking in my head like, what am I doing? What do I got to do? What do I got to do? Yeah. So what Joe said, those online, it's tough to go through that. It's tough to want to actually take that step. Here's the thing, this takes time. So if I can encourage you guys to do anything, it's just sit in the garbage for a little while. Just sit there, just take it in. And this is over the past month, I've really gotten, I believe this in my heart. Start writing. Write something. Wendy, you did it. COVID brought that best. I mean, that was, you probably did that on your own, but you made it public at that point. What happens when you have to write, or when you choose to write? Obligation versus inspiration. What happens? What happens when you try to do that? It gets really, yeah, it gets confusing, doesn't it? You're a great writer. You write a lot, and I bet you spend time on it too. You have to keep your words wisely. So when you write, you become unstoppable at that point because of the amount of things that you actually learn, and then you can articulate it. There's so much power in that. Your communication is drastically different over a period of time. Now, I've talked about it in Leadership Academy and just like personal development stuff. Journaling is a big component. Everybody, it's funny, the first time I said journaling in front of like a room of 60 people, they all looked at me like, oh gosh, don't make the face, don't make the face. I used to judge journaling as well. So I'm going to be on the way opposite side. I used to look at journaling as somebody that couldn't really take, I'm not this way anymore. I'm on the complete opposite side, but I judge those people as not being able to process things. Don't make that mistake. It's a processing mechanism for yourself if you're willing to be honest. And then you process it and you write it out and you're like, that doesn't make any sense though. So if I was to rewrite it, how would I rewrite it so it made sense? And you write it 3 times out and you're like, oh, that actually makes sense now. But you would have never gotten there if you would have just taken the surface level subconscious conversations that you're having in your head, which, by the way, guys, this is the goals. Like if you write down why am I not hitting my goals and you have to answer that question, it gets weird. Because you can either say, well, I didn't feel well, I'm not motivated, or you could say, I'm not eating right, I'm not going to bed on time, I'm not getting out of bed early. Those are kind of the same answers. One's deflecting, the other one's being very honest. That sound judgy? Nikki, don't apologize. Overthinking writes, underthinking read. I like that. Yep. Yep. It stimulates more thinking. I love that. That's great. Hopefully you guys don't have one. That's really good. When you're overthinking, write it down. When you're underthinking, read it. Write it, not write it down. Right. I didn't want to screw it up. See, I complicated it for no reason at all. So thank you for sharing that. I think there's, I'll take it one step further. After you write, take time to go back and read it. That's fun. Not always, but it's really because you're in a particular state of mind when you're writing about something. And when you go back and you're in a different state of mind and you read it, you're like, gosh, that's really interesting. I can't believe I thought that. And your state of mind actually is driving some of the really interesting things that you actually write down. You're like, wow, I don't understand that. So every year I actually review every single thing that I write, and I'll highlight the things that stick out, and at the end of the year I'll compile them. That over a period of time will give you more insight into yourself than almost anything else you can do. That's not part of the class at all, but we're good. All right. So Katie, can you go to, I'll share the documents if you can switch to that screen. So let's go to the, you guys all have a copy of it. Lindsay is going to post it in the chat for those that are online. But I want to walk through the basics of it. And I don't want to complicate it, but I do want, it's different on my screen, but that's all that matters. So concept of the 411, 4 weeks, 1 month, 1 year. Okay. So I'm going to try and stay close so you guys can hear me. And Lindsay, if you can just let me know if people are having a hard time as I kind of go over here. So at the bottom, you have week 1, week 2, week 3, and week 4. Okay, good. That makes sense. We have business and personal. I tell everybody that I look at 411s with, if you don't have personal stuff on there, you don't have a 411. Why would I say that? If you don't have personal stuff on your goal setting sheet, why would I consider it not to be a good tool? Work-life balance. What most of the time is driving this? So that's where a lot of people actually get confused, is I don't know what I want to write down personally because I'm just focused on my career and accomplishing hitting 10 million. Okay, Why 10 million? And don't give me a fluffy answer. Give me the honest one. Because what's going to happen is there's going to be a lot of pain that gets up to that 10 million. You're going to have to stretch yourself. If we don't have a reason behind it, is it going to be worth it for you to stick with it? Right? So make sure that we have both business and personal, which will run through categories. For sure. So this is the weekly section down here. Then you have your monthly section. And then you have your annual section. Your monthly and annual are broken into 4 categories. They're broken into your business, your job, which we'll discuss the difference, your personal finance, I added that one, and then your personal. Okay. So let's talk about business. I want you to actually just write these descriptions. The natural outcome that you're looking for. So the end result. So in business, we're going to talk about closed sales volume. We're going to talk about closed units. We're going to talk about listings taken. We're going to talk about buyer rep contracts. We're going to talk about the outcomes that we're actually looking to achieve. Okay. Now, how that's different from the job is those are the activities that you do on a daily and weekly basis that are going to drive the outcomes of the business. So let's take an example. Let's just say if I want to take 40 awesome, great. What are the activities that are going to drive more listings taken? Open houses, okay? Door knocking, okay? Cold calling. Okay. Setting appointments. So this is where strategy and commitment to activities shows up. So Karen, I'm really glad you said that. So up here we could say, you know, hold 40 open houses. And then we get down here is it's going to be 4 or 3. But the goal is to, okay, I want to set appointments this week. Now you're going to drive into what do I have to do? How many calls am I going to make? How many doors am I going to knock? How many past clients am I going to reach out to? Whatever your strategy is, that's what's going to drive that set appointments outcome. Make sense? This is where a lot of the confusion shows up between business and job. Your job is what you do every day. The business is the outcomes that you're obtaining. They can't hear me? I'm going to have to point and you guys are going to have, oh, is there a pointer on this? Ah, it won't work on the TV. Mute my computer. Is it on that now?
We're going to try it out.
Yeah, can you ask them to, well, monitor it, and if they can't, then I'll stay closer to this. So, any questions then on job and business? I explained it so well that there's not a single question. Cardi's got one. You always have a question.
I always have a question. There is a question right there.
Yeah. See, when you do an upswing, that's a question. You just did that. You don't have to. I'm putting you on the spot. You don't have to. Cardio. If you do have one, you're welcome.
No, I'll chime in. I'm not very shy.
I know you're not. I know you're not. That's why I picked on you. Yeah.
When it comes to activities, like how long do you commit to something to see if it's working, and or when you course correct if you don't like doing it or it's just not working right?
That's where I think if you have a coach, you can get guidance. I wouldn't put any time frame on it because if you farm, I'm going to say if you don't go 2 years, you wasted a lot of money. Now, if it's spirit referral, you could probably go 6 months, and if nothing's working, then we need to change what we're saying or what we're doing or how much we're doing. So now here's the thing though. if you don't track every activity you do, you're gonna have a very difficult time pivoting and making adjustments, knowing what works if you don't actually track it. Right? Yeah, you can say, yeah, that makes sense. I'm gonna track. Tracking is the most difficult thing for many of us. It's not our natural skill set. We don't like doing it. True. I know, because, well, I actually used to really not like it, but now I love it because of the information it actually gives me. But you have to go through that muddy middle of not understanding why am I even doing this? Your first 3 months of doing this, you're gonna ask, I don't notice any difference. Why do I keep even doing this? It's because you haven't done it long enough. And that's where most people quit. Okay? So know that muddy middle, there's a purpose in that muddy middle for you actually to get the other side and gain some wisdom from it. Okay? Then you go to personal finance. Personal finance could be your income, could be how much do I want to invest, could be I want to buy an investment property, it could be donate to a certain charity, it could be any of those things. Okay? And then your personal is going to consist of, in my opinion, your personal development, your free time, your hobbies, vacations, relationships. Kind of those are some of the core components. You typically see vacations on here, books read. There's a variety. I taught this class once, and I showed mine up there, not thinking anybody would actually read it. But they read it, and the one thing they read was, "Why do you have date night with your wife up there?" Like, duh. Like, yeah. That was up there because we had our son, and I bet you it was 8 months before we even realized we hadn't been on a date or together. I was like, I'm not okay with that. I listen to people that are wiser than me. They say, don't let that affect, like, make sure you still have a relationship. Your relationship is the first relationship. Because your kids will get everything they need once that relationship is where it needs to be, right? Yeah. So they were kind of like, why would you need to put that on there? Shouldn't that be obvious? Like, I thought the same thing until I went 8 months and didn't realize it was 8 months. So it can be silly things like, I don't call it silly. Yeah, I did. But it was necessary. Because if I didn't put it on there, I wouldn't. Setting dates takes like thought if you want it to be thoughtful, so it takes a little bit of time. Okay. Question?
Maybe I'm overthinking this, but generally speaking, do you have a suggestion for how many to go under each category?
Great, awesome question. No more. I wouldn't say more than 5.
Under each, so like business.
Well, yeah, definitely not under job, because what naturally shows up in your days, along as your to-do list, it's more than 1 page. How much of that 1 page is a top priority?
Usually that
But
doesn't
it
show up
depends on who you're asking.
Well, it always depends on who I'm asking. But I'll think about, okay, who gets the most results? They're focused on this, not this. So, as a general rule, like, I wouldn't put 5 things under personal finance in any given year, because money is a byproduct of a lot of things that you're like. You're building things to the future, right? Now, once you get used to it, it's easier. On your weekly, I wouldn't say any more than 3 to 4. So in either category, business or personal. So if it's more than that, I bet you're pressing to get it all done if it's really important stuff.
So in your experience, when people do about 3 or less, they tend to be more successful with that.
Yeah, so think about 4 disciplines of execution. There was a chart on there, and I can't remember. I'm gonna kind of mess up the exact numbers, but they did this study of actually executing on goals, and what they saw was when somebody had 1 to 2 goals, their implementation was like 80+%. When they had 3 to 4, it was like 60, and more than 5 was like 30-some% rate of goal, like completing the goals. So it basically provided validity of, okay, focus on this right now. It doesn't mean you're focusing on that forever. It means that's for today. and then focus on this today. Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah, the more people put on there, the more it becomes a to-do list, so you don't even need this, you can just use your legal pad. So, Ellie?
Yeah, so I'm a member of the One Thing community, and one of the things they teach there is to have your 20% here and flip it over for your to-do list.
Oh, perfect.
So then that way, you know, it's things you want to do, but keep what's most important done.
Love that. So those online, you said, keep your 20% on the front of the tool and your to-do list on the back. Okay. So for those that I hold a couple of accountability groups, which we'll talk about. But I'm I'm actually not old school, but for this, I'm old school. This is my to-do list. This goes with me everywhere. Here's what I know. How many tabs? Who's got a computer up right? How many tabs do you have up right on your computer right now? 5. Okay, who else said? I wanted to ask you, actually, that's really good. How many? Okay, yeah, you're a good liar too. So that's kind of my point though, because when you have your tracking mechanism mixed in with 15 other pages, I've yet to find anybody that's tracked well with that strategy. And I think there's something important about having it printed out and you manually are tracking it. Because if you track on your computer, you don't actually know what is a new tracking thing and what's an old tracking thing because it's numerical, and once you switch it, you don't know what the previous number was. Does that make sense? I want to make sure that it's registered. So my suggestion is pick your day. So let's just say your week starts on Monday and ends on Sunday. You track throughout the week. On Sunday, you kind of pull all the numbers together in the week. You update the monthly. Leave the annuals alone until the month's over. So each week, fill that out. That week's over. Okay, I'm going to update each one of these. If I was to read 50 pages, I'm going to be at 50 pages. My goal is 200. Second week, do the same thing. Update it. The 31st or whatever the end of that month is. Now you're taking these end results and updating your annual. Does that help? Kind of?
Yeah.
Well, everybody's like, well, you're an idiot if you can't do that, Jake. So, well, of course, we get it. So, but there's a lot of ambiguity that shows up if we're not careful. Because as soon as one of these goals are off, and inherently we know we didn't track it all the way, what naturally happens is the focus of that goal. It's not right anyway, so I probably should just start over. That's not fun either, because then we don't have enough evidence over a period of time, to your point, Jeff, to really be able to say, is this working or is it not working? Okay. What haven't I touched on here that you guys have questions on? Okay.
Did you fill it all out in 1 week?
I was gonna actually do that when I was in 1 month. You mean?
Shoot.
No, I forgot. So you reminded me when I was talking about. So when you have goals for the month, would it make sense to just put the same goals and fill it out for the whole month every week? Makes sense. It's not smart, but it makes sense. Because why?
Every week's different.
Every week's different.
Consistency.
Consistency. So every week's different, so the results are going to be different for every week. And what happens when we have a whole month and we don't have to really visit this? Because I already know what my goals are. I don't even have to look at it anymore. Right? So because if our goal is to set 5 listing appointments and we have set 2 listing appointments here and we hit 1, we have 4 left, right? We set 1 here. We have 3 left, right? We set 0 here, still have 3 left. See how you have to navigate throughout the month in order to make sure that you're pacing where you say you want to be? Super important. So great question, Katie. Fill it out 1 week at a time. It requires you to revisit it, update it, and then find out where you're at. Okay? What else? Anything? Okay. Crushing this right now.
I actually have a question for you. So, do you reevaluate your year goals every month, or do you go like a quarter and then say, you know what, I need to reevaluate these goals?
I don't.
So your goals are your goals for the year.
Question was, do you reevaluate your annual goals either monthly or quarterly or maybe twice a year? I don't. That's, so if we go back to the beginning of the conversation where we talk about commitment and what do we really want and is that truly what we really want? I like to establish that on the front end because there tends to be too much ambiguity to be able to change goals along the way if you don't do that, where you make a commitment to yourself to follow through with it regardless of what shows up. If we start to change some of this stuff, take this the right way. Sometimes when we change the annual goals, we're only doing it to make ourselves feel better because we're so far behind. Not because that's actually what we should do. We just want to feel better.
What if you're super far ahead?
That's a good question. What if you're super far ahead?
Why stop?
Well, I think it's a one-on-one conversation because we could always just up it without any meaning behind it. Or you could just say, screw it, I'm taking a vacation, I don't really care. There's value in both. You remember Shay, a long time ago in our group? By August, she hit her goal. And she was just like, I don't know what to do. Like, should I reset it? Or it's like, what do you want to do? I'm like, I don't know. I pretty much made my goal. Set a vacation. Go somewhere. I don't care. But it causes confusion, which requires you to reevaluate, actually. But I'll also say if you're setting challenging goals, that's not the norm. Which I want to set goals out of reach, but not out of sight. Really easy to think really, really big. We're taught to think really, really big in this company, and I love that because it expands our thinking. But I also think it can be super defeating because it's so far out there. It's such a big goal. I think setting big goals is a process. I don't think you start at the beginning with necessarily the biggest goal. I always say you climb to the top of the mountain, then you'll be able to see further. I don't know in 10 years what my goals are. I can write it out. I can have an idea, but I promise you things are going to change, and I'm going to deviate from that. But it is a North Star to a certain extent. Those 10-year goals are more like pillars of what you want your life to stand for than any particular outcome. That's the way I view them.
Is there a certain time that you set your annual goals? I can think of, especially KW, everyone has like an anniversary date or the actual annual year. Or is there a strategy on it you like take into the fall and say, okay, I'm setting goals for next year? Does that work best? What have you seen best? People have a different timeline of what a year looks like.
Well, so the question is when is a good time, or what have you seen to be a good time to set your goals? For business, I'm saying September or October. Why?
Takes time to do business thing, hire people, go into that.
There's
And there's a reflection and refining time.
there's always lag measures. Like there's things that show up from the conversations that you're having today that will show up 3 months from now or 6 months from now. So on the business side, I always tend to lean 3 to 4 months ahead because you set the goal and then you need to kind of set the systems up in order to be able to start doing those goals, and then you'll have the results show up after that, right?
And as far as anniversary dates, the IRS has set us all on the same anniversary date.
Yep.
So use that as our anniversary days.
Yeah, I would definitely use your anniversary of January, your net income should be similar. It's going to be similar either way. You can shift months however you want, but yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, I was gonna also like go along with like, I like how you said start planning your business goals September, October, because they give you time to think about what needs to happen January 1st. If you start planning January 1st, then you're not gonna see what you wanted to see till March or April.
Well, you actually need to start implementing in October, November, December for January 1st to show up the way you want it to.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's actually starting, the activities are starting October for results January, right? For my personal stuff, I'll look at the end of November, early December. That's me. It's when I take 2 to 3 days and I just go off by myself and I look at everything. And I wrestle with things and I question things and I question, like sometimes I was like, why do I even do that? Part of me is just because I want to accomplish something. The other part is, but why though? Like I've had plenty of goals that I've set that actually mean nothing. They don't feed me at all, but it was a great accomplishment. I've learned to just shift from those because they don't actually do anything for me. It's just more of a commitment to see what I can do. I'd rather focus on the things that mean something to me than just prove that I can fight through a meaningless goal. That's not fun.
So I know there's some people in this room who have probably never done a 411 before. My question to you, since you say a good time to plan out the year is September, October, what would you suggest someone who's doing it for the first time now? Like, how would they structure that so they can begin the habit and then also flush it out for next year? Like, not wait until August or September.
Well, I have a very uninspiring, just start.
Cool, thanks.
Everybody's experience is going to be different, but if you start commit to it, you'll know, like you can reset, like I'd rather have you reset in November and have it be more accurate than just stick to something you set in September and you didn't really know what you were setting. So I did leave some flexibility in there with it, but start it and learn it. Like I can go look at my ones from 2012 and the goals that I set make me cringe, just how I wrote them. Like I wrote this big long sentence. Well, that's not a goal, just create something definable. So
I haven't thought about it this way until today, but it's kind of the way I've done it, is if you start in the upper right-hand corner and say, these are my personal goals. For example, I want to go to Europe or whatever. What is that going to cost me? Then go to the left personal financial and say, I've got to put this away for taxes and this away for retirement and whatever. And that dictates what's in the upper left-hand corner.
Absolutely can do that. I think what I've learned is I'm trying not to put too many parameters around it because everybody's brain works a little bit different. So, but you just nailed the importance of getting over here and making sure this is something meaningful because you can now justify it in your activities on any given week.
Well, I think in my 10 plus years with this company, I in the beginning, it was like, oh, you got to have business, you got to be a mega, you got to be 20 million, you got to be whatever, and it didn't mean anything.
Oh.
But if I go to the right and work backwards across that top column, it starts to mean.
The best part is, so if you look at, if you're new to the business, PC should be walking you through this process where you kind of set, what do you want to make? Why do you want to make it? And now you start setting that goal and you have the whys over here. Now here's the fun part. You go through the economic business plan and you figure out the work that it's going to take you to actually accomplish that. You have a barometer to say, yes, I'm willing to do that, or no, I'm not. Because a lot of times people will put something material over here that actually means nothing to them. But it would be nice to have. But they're not willing to do the work based on the economic plan. So why don't we just address it right now so we don't beat the hell out of ourselves for however many months? But that's not even that important to me. So I'm not saying don't set big financial goals. I think setting big financial goals is about other people. It has nothing to do with you. But I'm also very well aware that up to 75 grand, we're all working for the same reason. We want to pay, we want to become secure, we want to have a place to live, we don't want to be living paycheck to paycheck. Over and above that, we all have to figure out our own reasons of what actually means something. It could be donating, it could be family vacation, it could be experiences. I've actually learned that this is more important from an experiences perspective than it is anything concrete, like I want to hold on to or buy. It's more of an experience with the people in my world. Take those with you, right? I don't know if that helps, but I think it's a really good.
I think we're actually on.
We're talking the same thing. Yeah. Okay. Cool. All right. So let's just talk the basics of walking through this. So, Katie, I'm going to go to my screen. See if we can highlight that. So, new. All right. So, you guys know Stephen Covey. There's 4 quadrants that he kind of looks at things. This is similar to the 80-20 principle, okay? So I'm just going to use, and I'm going to actually put something up on the screen here shortly. But so the 4 quadrants have importance and urgency. So up here, it's important and urgent. Top left is important and urgent. On the top right, it's important, not urgent. And then not important and urgent. And then this one is a waste of everybody's time. It's my drawing. Where naturally would you say that's where I should be spending my time? What quadrant would you say? Top left, okay? Why? Okay. Okay, so are vacations urgent? You guys are so full of it. You know how many times I haven't been on vacation in 18 months. Well, that sounds urgent and you still haven't done anything. I want you to think about that. Is lead generation urgent? If you don't have any business, super urgent. If you have a lot of business, is it urgent? If you think about this, this is an absolutely important place to be. But if you live here, the most important things get put aside.
You can't plan that box, you can plan the other box, right? Planning leads to things being less urgent because things that are important are usually the same things that are important. And if you're doing the important things on a timeline, like planned out, then they don't go in that other box where it becomes urgent.
Right. So there's always going to be things that people need from you. It doesn't mean that it should get in the way of your workout. Is health urgent? Not until it becomes urgent. Are your finances urgent? Not until it becomes urgent. So it's really interesting if you're in great shape and now you start to neglect it because you have all this other stuff that has to take your time. Eventually that's going to be a problem. So I want to, Katie, could you put the urgent, not urgent graphic up for the Zoom people, please?
So Jake,
yeah.
The urgent and important, that's basically you're fighting fires all day long.
All the time.
So you're just in that.
It has nothing to do with what you want to do. It's based on all these pressing, you can see it. Pressing problems, deadline-driven projects, crisis, outside stuff coming in, kind of like what Kevin said. Okay. The not urgent is prevention. I mean, this is corporate type of talk, but I saw this graphic. I was like, I think we can prove a point. This is where the creativity comes in, finding different levels of opportunity. Your planning typically isn't urgent, super important if we want to have a direction to go. recreation, personal stuff. The work-life balance conversation is typically what gets put on the back burner. The personal stuff, when you have a buyer that says, I have to go see this property, and you promised your kid you were going to be at his basketball game. Do you know where you stand on that? If you don't, you're going to go over here. Promise. But the basketball game isn't urgent. It's super important. Okay. Now you get down to not important but urgent is this is the best way for me to describe it. That's everybody else's agenda for you. It's not your agenda. It's theirs. Now, will you spend some time down here? Yeah, you will. And then you go, neither. I don't like going here. Because even if it says some phone calls, I could put phone calls in up here and make them super meaningful. But if it's a phone call that there's nothing for me to get out of it, and there's nothing that they're just asking for stuff from me that we don't even have a relationship. I'm not wasting time on that. Does that help? So when you're looking at your 401, make sure you're spending as much time here as you possibly can. And even if it's 20%, you're going to win. It doesn't have to be 100% because we both know if you spend 2 to 3 hours a day on the most important things, you can go do whatever else you want the rest of the day. And you're going to be just fine. Every day. Okay? How many have worked in the corporate world prior to being in real estate? Okay. So in that situation, you show up for work, what happens? You get paid. You show up, you get paid. Right?
Lots of meetings.
Lots of meetings. Well, you're here, so thank you. When you become an entrepreneur, what happens? You show up for work.
No one else gets paid.
So well, hopefully not. But you show up for work. Maybe you'll get paid, maybe you won't. Here's what happens. I can't tell you how many times, and if you've said this to me, I apologize. But if you constantly come in and we're coaching, you constantly come in and have a conversation with me and say, I'm working 14 hours a day and I can't keep doing this. Okay, cap rolling, right down there.
Man down.
At a certain point, we're going to have a really honest conversation. Because if you expect 14 hours a day to make you money, we're focused on the wrong thing. We're focused on time. We're not focused on being effective. Okay? So I can show you people that work 8 hours a day and are super productive and super effective and make a lot of money. It's called the 50-50 fallacy. If I put this time in, I'm going to make this much money. No, it's not. Not true. Doesn't work that way. I actually don't want it to work that way because it rewards the people that focus on the right things. So if you're focused on the right things, you're going to be properly rewarded for that. Okay, so just be aware of that. Time doesn't equate to money. All right. Katie, can we go back to the white screen? Or actually, no, it's mine. Can you pin mine? All right, so we talked about setting definitive goals on how to measure if it's a good goal or not. You guys know the SMART acronym? That's a sweet mess. I'm not going to be able to look at that thing. All right. So any single goal you set in your world, put it up against this. Okay. What does the S stand for? Specific. Okay. Specific. And I know this sounds elementary, but I promise you that it's fundamental to make sure that you're not setting goals that you can. You can set goals where you're like, I kind of hit it, but I realized I kind of didn't. But it feels better, so I'm just going to say I hit it. That's what we're trying to avoid. What's the M stand for?
Measurable.
Okay. guys know this.
Achievable.
So it's attainable and action oriented. I kind of intertwine those. We want it to be, like I said before, just out of reach, not out of sight. But I put action in there because it forces you to be. I do this with people that have teams. Like they'll set a goal that their team member is going to do. Okay, one way to do it. However, this has to be your action. So if you're going to set a goal for yourself, it has to require action from you. Make sense? R? Realistic, I've heard that. I intertwine attainable and I write down results driven. So what do I mean by that? I mean that there's an outcome that we're striving for. There's a certain result that we're actually, it's the intention behind it. Okay? And the T is what? Time bound. A goal without a time attached to it probably won't get done. I'm a big believer that, work expands the time allowed. Like if something has to get done pretty quick, you naturally put your focus into it. If you have all this time, it probably ends up in the last 20% and then it gets done. So any goal that you set up on the 411, run it through this test. Because if it doesn't hit if it misses any one of these, you can find ways out of it, which if that's what you're looking for, great. But if you're looking for something that's going to drive your attention, this is your outcome. Okay? Questions on that? Handwriting? Wow, that's super kind. A+. Didn't even know it registered on the grade scale. All right. Real quickly, I just want to draw. You guys familiar with E to P? Entrepreneurial, purposeful. Gosh. This is your natural ceiling of achievement, meaning we all have different ceilings of achievement, right? Some of us are more talented, that there's natural skill sets that drive it. This could be in any industry, and somebody else could be way better on a different side. So what happens though is you start to go up, and you'll hit some bumps in the road, and then you'll go down, and then you'll come back up. These are decision points. You're going to hit your natural level of achievement, and you have a decision to make at that point. And that's whether or not you're willing to shift a little bit of what you do and how you do it, what you focus on, in order to get to the next level. This can be super painful. So I always use an example when I was selling that I hit 10 closings in a month. I came home on the 30th. I was just fried. And my wife said something that I'll never, it just registers. She said, if you can't be happy doing that, what are you doing? Probably not the best time to ask me, but it was a fair question. After that point, this is where I went. It was one of those times, and I don't want to make it sound bad. I couldn't have cared less if I got another lead. I was actually hoping I wouldn't get one because I was just so tired that I didn't want to deal with it. In my mind, I don't need the money. I don't want to do that. I don't even know if I want to stay in real estate. But this can be a super painful time. And that's where other people can really help you through that. You're willing to expose yourself to tough questions and really honest dialogue. this is a natural cycle. So if you never choose to break through, this is going to be your ceiling. What happens up here is you start to implement systems. You know you're focusing on your top 20%. So systems models, focus on your 20%. I'm going to say this is the biggest one. Accountability. Being that it's outside your natural strengths, you're going to need support from somebody else to keep you focused. This is where a great coach, a mentor, team leader, PC, whatever it is, they allow you to break through that. But this is a decision point that you have to make on whether or not. A lot of people shy away from this, guys. And that's your unlock to actually understand yourself at a better level and get to the next level. And I believe that in my core. If you don't want to be held accountable, it's because you're trying to shy away from feeling certain pain that you just don't want to address. So, again, it's not a judgment. It's just part of it. So, when you're going through that process and you're setting goals, these are the 3 questions that I want you to answer. Actually, yeah, I think that's important enough. I'm not going to get to a couple of things, but what do you want to accomplish? How are you going to achieve it? And when will you accomplish them? So what is it that you want to accomplish? How are you going to achieve it? And when do you want to accomplish them? Okay. So when you look at your goals, make sure you ask those questions. Those questions are super important to get clarity on. And the when part is the time blocking part. And I'm going to go through, just because of time, I'm going to move through the calendar a little bit quicker than I would have otherwise. Remember what I said at the beginning about the calendar? What is it not? It's not a prison. If it's a prison, how do you have it set up? I'd be curious. If you feel like your schedule is a prison, what would it look like if it wasn't a prison?
More time obvious.
So that answer came pretty quickly.
I thought you were asking questions.
Well, I was, but I love when people answer too. Is some people are probably processing like that. Now, keep in mind that a part of that, your schedule has to be responsibility. Because naturally, wouldn't you think that it would make sense to me that if we set it up properly, we want to be in a better place at the end of the day than where we started the day. And if we don't put any responsibility into that, what are the chances of that actually being better at the end of the day if we just, now, if you do that, vacation and all of that stuff, do that. But I'm saying over a period of time, if you don't put any responsibility into your schedule, what's going to show up? Nothing. Or things you don't want, right? So here's my thought process is, why not set up your schedule your way so it's a way that you want it to be? Remember when I said negotiate versus tyrannize? Negotiate with yourself on how you set your calendar up. I listened to something recently and it says we make terrible employees and worse bosses. Like, well, where does that leave anybody then? Like, how does that make sense? But if you think about it, if we don't know what to do, we're not going to be able to figure out the actions that even lead to anything. But once we figure out what we want to do, and then we try to tell ourselves to do it, and then we don't do that, like, how does that work? And I think that's where the negotiation comes into play. Rather than just telling ourselves what we need to do all the time, tell yourself what you need to do and then reward yourself. If you lead generate for an hour, then I don't know, go eat some Sour Patch Kids. They're right out there. Good ones. Does that make sense? This is the first time I've kind of walked through this, so as I process it, it's like I know it made sense minutes in it, and now I wrote it down. If we're just constantly counting on ourselves to just follow a stringent script schedule, we're not wired that way. So if we don't negotiate, put some positive rewards in there, you think there's going to be a challenge. Either you're going to do it all the way through and you're going to be super unhappy because you're just following it, or you're just going to say, screw it, I hate this. Neither one of those is healthy. So give yourself some of that space. Okay? So I'm going to end on this and then we can finish with questions or ahas. Find a system that allows you to track effectively every day. Because what happens is we'll get through our day and then we'll try to remember how many calls we made, or we'll try to remember how much time we spent on something, or we'll try to remember a certain conversation. Track it throughout each and every day and then just roll it upwards. The tracking issue is a real one when it comes down to the accuracy of what the goal is, where you are, and the gap that's there. So make really sure that we're looking at this as, I got to keep that with me, keep that 411 with you, so you can update it whenever you have stuff that you're doing that is in your top 20%. Accountable people know their numbers. What I've learned is, if you set a goal to have 50 calls and then you come in and you say, I think I called around 40. What's the real number? It's probably like 20. Because each call feels a little bit more painful. You're like, oh, I only made one call, it feels like 5, but make sure that we're keeping the accuracy. Keeping your accuracy there. Okay? And then just be honest with yourself. That's the biggest ask. Just be honest with the results that you're actually achieving, and then figure out how to get yourself to the next step. Okay. Thoughts, questions, ahas,